Thank you for listening to the rough draft of this chapter in company of the Crescent Blades. Consider donating directly to the author through cashapp at $EliasLeast. Leave a comment on what you think about the story so far, and continue your support by sharing your thoughts and the video. Chapter 14. How Gods Are Born. The company of the Crescent Blades found themselves in a state of bewilderment, their hearts heavy with uncertainty, as they struggled to come to terms with the abrupt departure of their enigmatic leader, Lord Cyrus. The Iris had completed its cycle against the sun, and a full day had passed since that fateful morning when he had vanished without a trace, leaving them on a seemingly inconsequential grassy trail that meandered towards the imposing silhouette of a distant mountain. The vibrant green grass swayed gently in the breeze, a stark contrast to the somber mood that had settled over the group. An unsettling silence enveloped them, as they remained rooted to the spot, unable to shake off the strange turn of events that had left them questioning their purpose and the direction they should take. The marked location on the map, their original destination, seemed to mock them, the red splotch a stark reminder of the mission they had once been so eager to embark upon. Doubt and hesitation gnawed at their resolve, and they found themselves at a crossroads, both figuratively and literally. Lord Cyrus had entrusted them with a monumental task, to stay united and forge an army in his absence, a force to be reckoned with. His parting gift, a veritable fortune in precious gemstones, lay before them, their dazzling brilliance a testament to the gravity of their mission. The gems were not meant to line their own pockets. They were the foundation upon which this future army would be built. The first step towards fulfilling their duty lay in venturing towards the enigmatic destination etched on the map, nestled halfway up the mysterious mountain that loomed in the distance. They knew in their hearts that they should continue their journey, seeking out this elusive place and carrying out their Lord's wishes. And yet, the void left by Cyrus's departure weighed heavily upon them, draining them of the motivation and drive they had once possessed. As they stood on the grassy trail, torn between their loyalty to their leader and their own doubts, with the exception of Lillian, they each wished to find a way to rekindle the flames of determination that had once burned brightly within them. Cyrus and Clang, two imposing warriors with muscles like rippling steel and a camaraderie that had been forged through countless battles, stood bewildered. Their impressive skills had been honed over years of fighting side by side, but they had met their match in the formidable Lord Cyrus. Once proud members of a prestigious caravan, they had been humbled and left emasculated by Cyrus's unparalleled might in a swift and devastating duel. As eunuchs, they had no choice but to submit to their conqueror and offer their unwavering loyalty in service to him. With a surprising grace that belied his fierce reputation, Cyrus had accepted their offer. But now, much to their confusion, he had disappeared, leaving the two warriors with an unexpected burden, the responsibility of caring for 3 young boys and now a little girl. Suddenly, as if the winds of fate had shifted course, their thrilling adventure screeched to a halt. The absence of Lord Cyrus left Cyrus and Clang disoriented, unsure of how to proceed. The once unshakable warriors now found themselves in unfamiliar territory, faced with the challenge of mentoring 4 inexperienced youths who were hungry for excitement and glory. Clang looked up to his old friend. "I know what you are thinking. I am of the same mind." Cyrus nodded his head towards Clang. "We swore an oath. We both take that very seriously." Clang shrugged. "Which is why we will stay. Let's just try to not get these children killed." Cyrus laughed. "Let's just try to not let these children kill us." Cyrus and Clang knew that their lives had taken an unexpected turn, and that the path that lay ahead was murky and uncertain. But they had made a solemn vow to serve Lord Cyrus, and it meant guiding these young, eager kids through the perilous world of mercenaries and warriors. And so, with heavy hearts and steely determination, they prepared to embark on a new journey, fraught with challenges and unforeseen perils. Eamon and Gavrik were the third and fourth sons of a prominent merchant trader on the cusp of becoming the next caravan master. However, as the younger siblings, they would not benefit from their father's rise in status, and so they had to carve out their own destinies and seek fortune elsewhere. The boys, eager for adventure and inspired by the legendary prowess of Lord Cyrus, approached the mighty warrior and implored him to take them under his wing. To their delight, he had welcomed them into his newly formed band of mercenaries, which seemed to promise an exhilarating journey filled with daring exploits and epic battles. Their eyes gleamed with anticipation as they imagined the grand tales of heroism that would one day be told of their deeds. Lyrian awoke very late in the day, swaddled in the most sumptuous bed she had ever encountered. The plush mattress and silky sheets enveloped her like a loving embrace, providing a sanctuary of unparalleled comfort. Her mind reeled with wonder at her incredible luck. Not only had she escaped a gruesome execution in Emberstaff, but she now found herself in the company of these naive individuals who had stumbled upon a veritable king's treasure in dazzling gems. Her thoughts raced as she devised a myriad of ways to exploit their newfound wealth. Her plan was simple. She would bolster Eldric's confidence and promote his leadership, fully aware that doing so would eventually bring about the downfall of the others. She alone would emerge unscathed, the crafty survivor in this high-stakes game of power and deception. She looked over her appearance in the beautiful mirror that seemed to be a part of the wall. She had never seen anything like it. She looked at her black cloth armor and the midnight steel dagger along with the sword-breaker at her side. She had been thinking that a lot since she met this man, Cyrus. She reached into the firepot and dabbed some ash under her eyes, a trick she had learned from one of the many whores that raised her. She was sure that her mother was among them, but never found out which one it was. Lillian looked out the small, darkened window and saw the prize of her eye right outside. She primped her dress and opened the door. Eldric's heart pounded in his chest as waves of anxiety washed over him. He questioned why Lord Cyrus had placed such an enormous burden of leadership upon his inexperienced shoulders. The very idea seemed absurd, and he felt certain that no one would heed his commands. He should have never admitted to being able to read. He had ventured into this untamed wilderness, leaving behind his life of drinking and whoring, only at the urging of Eamon and Gavrik. He had been content with his humble life, having cultivated a deep understanding of horses and established a reputation within the caravan community. Now, however, he was surrounded by this motley crew of characters, far removed from the familiar rhythms of caravan life he had once known. Just as he was passing Cyrus's wagon, the door swung open to reveal the newest member of the team, Lillian. She was strikingly beautiful, all of 16 years old. A year younger than Eldric, but as soon as their eyes met, he knew that she was much more knowledgeable than her years would have led on. "Pardon, my lord, I seem to have slept in your private quarters. If you would like for me to show you around in here, it would be my pleasure," Lillian said seductively. Eldric knew that tone well. It was a siren's call, and it was trouble, the kind of trouble that he lived for. He did not respond as he followed her into the cabin. Lillian led Eldric to the back room, where Cyrus's luxurious feather mattress awaited them. The room was dimly lit, but the faint glow of candles flickered across the walls, casting dancing shadows. Eldric was relieved that things seemed to be working out for him after all the uncertainty and doubt he had been experiencing. He glanced around the room, taking in the opulent furnishings and ornate decorations. As he passed by the giant mirror, he stopped in amazement. The surface of the mirror shimmered and reflected an array of letters and strange symbols that he didn't understand. He couldn't take his eyes off the mirror, completely lost in the deep meanings that he was trying to decipher. Meanwhile, Lillian was growing increasingly impatient. The words were not visible to her at all. She had expected Eldric to be much more responsive to her advances, but he seemed to be completely absorbed in the mirror. She tried to get his attention by seductively removing her clothes and tossing them across the room. However, Eldrick remained oblivious. Frustrated, Lillian cleared her throat loudly to get his attention, but he still didn't respond. She could not believe this egotistical bastard. There must be something seriously wrong with him, staring blankly at his own reflection instead of her. Lillian watched him in confusion, wondering what he could possibly be seeing in the mirror. Her rage had reached its boiling point as she watched Eldrick, completely oblivious to her presence. She had tried everything to get his attention, but nothing seemed to work. With each passing moment, her frustration grew until she could no longer contain it. She stood atop the large bed, naked and seething, her mind racing with thoughts of revenge. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for a way to inflict pain upon the source of her ire. She had thrown all her weapons across the room, in an attempt to seduce the boy, but then she spotted a knife on the bedside table. It looked like it had been neglected for some time, just like she had been. The anger inside her was burning like a wildfire, and she knew she had to do something to make him pay for his arrogance. Lillian had always been impulsive, and she had accepted that about herself a long time ago. As she picked up the knife, she considered stabbing him in the kidney, but then she had a better idea. She didn't want to kill him, so she would give him a nice deep scar across his back. That would teach him a lesson he would never forget. Without a second thought, Lillian hurled her pale, naked body off the bed and flew towards Eldrick, the knife gleaming in her hand. With all her strength, she scraped the blade across his back, expecting to feel it slice through flesh and muscle. But to her shock and dismay, the knife didn't even cut through his black cloth shirt. Lillian's heart was pounding in her chest as she stared up at Eldrick. The blade still looked sharp, yet it had failed to penetrate the thin cloth. How was that even possible? She had never encountered such a thing before. She lifted the blade up to the light, examining it closely, but the edge looked sharp, nothing flat or rusty about it. She felt a sharp pain in her finger as she pricked it with the tip of the knife, drawing a small bead of blood. She brought her finger to her mouth, tasting the metallic tang. Her anger boiled over as she turned to Eldrick, who was still lost in his own reflection, completely oblivious to her presence. With a fierce determination, she stormed towards him, the knife held with both hands. She was going to teach him a lesson he wouldn't soon forget. She would show him that she was not to be trifled with. "Kidney it is," she shouted as she went to plunge the dagger into the soft meat on the side of his spine, just above the waist. She grunted as she drilled the weapon into him with a twist. All this accomplished was to push him to the side a couple of steps. Her fury gave way to confusion and disbelief. She stared at the dagger in her hand, then back at Eldrick, who remained oblivious to her attempted attack. This made no sense. She had to find a way to get through that armor. With a sigh, she gripped the useless dagger and picked up her own armor from the floor. As she examined it, she noticed that it was made from the same material as Eldrick's, something tough and durable. She tossed it onto the bed and stabbed it repeatedly with all her strength until she was out of breath and her bare breasts heaved with her exhaustion. She glanced at Eldrick to make sure he hadn't snapped out of his stupor and began to examine her own black armor. Curious, she turned it over in her hands to find that it was still in perfect condition. It was made of some dark metallic material that seemed almost alive, as if it had a will of its own. She could see the small amount of light in the room being absorbed into its depths, and knew that it would give a huge advantage when she needed to do night work. Lillian was in awe as she moved on to examine the blade and the sword-breaker that Cyrus had transformed for her. She smiled at her own thoughts. That name, sword-breaker, is completely misleading. The intended function of those parrying daggers was to entrap the opponent's blade. They do that rather well. What they don't do is break swords. The intricate designs on both hilts shimmered in the dim light of the room, the same design that was etched in the mirror and shown on the side of the wagon. The weapon seemed to radiate power, and she could feel a strange energy coursing through her veins as she held them in her hand. Lillian knew that her jeweled dagger and her notched parrying dagger were special. Although they had not been forged by a master, they had been imbued with some ancient magic. With these weapons in hand, she felt confident that she could take on any foe, no matter how powerful they might be. She tested their weight and balance, twirling them both deftly in her hands. The time she took examining the weapons and her own armor had taken the fire out of her anger, and she sat on the bed. She looked once more at Eldrick before she sighed and gave up on him entirely. The armor seemed to fit her perfectly as she slipped it on, molding to her body like a second skin. Feeling its weight and protection, she drew her black dagger once again from its sheath. Lillian grinned as she ran the blade ever so gently across her leg, watching in amazement as it sliced through the armor with ease. But as she looked closer, she saw the fabric begin to knit itself back together before her eyes, repairing itself with a strange magic that she couldn't comprehend. Realizing the incredible power that this weapon and the armor held, Lillian decided to seek out the rest of the group and show them what she had discovered. As she made her way out of the wagon, she couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement and anticipation. She knew that this discovery could change everything for their group. It was exactly what they all needed to be more confident in this mission to build an army. She was actually excited to see where all this led. Lillian marched out of the wagon with a sense of purpose, the mundane knife from inside the cabin secured in the belt around her waist. Her own weapons held their rightful place in their sheaths on the same belt. She saw the two large men, Cyrus and Clang, trying to train the two brothers. She didn't remember their names. She called out to the group of warriors and motioned for them to gather around her. They curiously formed a square around the girl, their weapons, armor, and sweat gleaming in the sun. With a sly smile on her face, Lillian started to speak, her voice carrying easily across the open field. "I have something to show you all," she declared, holding up the knife for all to see. She looked around the circle, her eyes settling on Gavrik, the youngest and least experienced fighter in the group. He had focused his spare time on herbalism, a gentle and peaceful pursuit that seemed out of place in her world of battles and bloodshed. Lillian knew that he would be an easy target, and she wanted to prove to the others just how powerful her new discovery was. "Come forward, Gavrik," she called out, beckoning him with a wave of her hand. "Let me show you what this knife can do." Gavrik hesitated, unsure of what Lillian had in store for him. He had trained in combat, but he was an honorable man, and he refused to fight against a woman. "I will not raise a weapon to a little girl." Lillian let out a boisterous laugh, amused by Gavrik's naivety. "You don't want to fight me because I'm a girl," she taunted, her eyes flashing with mischief. "Well, I'll tell you what, I'll give you a free shot. You can hit me as hard as you can, and I won't even flinch." Gavrik looked at her skeptically and shook his head. "I will not raise a hand to you either. A woman should not be in a position to defend herself alone. You should get a husband to protect you." Lillian nodded. "Oh, a husband." She looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "I was almost married once. Billy was the love of my life. Then they took him from me. It was truly dreadful." She opened her arms and walked towards Gavrik with a devastated look of sadness on her face. They looked as though they were about to embrace, and Gavrik was truly an honorable man. He would hold her and make sure that this little girl was safe. At the last moment, Lillian sidestepped and swung her fist at Gavrik's nose with lightning speed. The impact was so forceful that it flattened the skin against his face, knocking him off his feet and onto the ground. Cyrus and Clang guffawed at the situation, while Eamon, Gavrik's brother, rushed over to check on him, confirming that his nose was broken. The group then realized the true depth of Lillian's acting skills. She had just taken down the youngest fighter with a single punch, and they could only imagine what she could do with a real weapon. They could see the determination in her eyes, and they knew that they should be wary of this young woman. Eamon looked at Lillian's weapons, his eyes narrowing as he tried to determine their purpose. The strange ridges on the blade of her parrying dagger were unlike anything he had ever seen before. He knew that he had seen her with two black weapons when Lord Cyrus had left. He had to admit he was impressed by the edge and balance of his own short sword and watched Lillian approach. He couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation at a chance to spar with this little vixen.
"Didn't Lord Cyrus gift you a proper weapon before he left?" Eamon taunted, trying to throw her off balance. Lillian shrugged off his comment and continued to advance, a mischievous grin spreading across her face. "I would kill you with that blade, and I'm simply trying to show you something. This knife will do the job just fine. First, though, I think I'll break your nose so you match your brother." Gavrik, who was still nursing his broken nose, shouted encouragement to his brother. "Bloody that bitch, Eamon!" he yelled, his voice filled with rage. Eamon gritted his teeth and readied himself for the fight to come. He knew that Lillian was skilled with her unusual weapon, but he was determined to give her a run for her money. The tension in the air was palpable as the two fighters circled each other, their eyes locked in a fierce battle of wills. Lillian watched as Eamon charged towards her, his weapon raised high. She was ready for his attack and brought up her swordbreaker to block, using her expertise to slide his blade directly into the grooves of her weapon. With a slight twist, she sent Eamon's weapon flying across the small area where they practiced. Clang and Service watched the entire scene, impressed with Lillian's quick reflexes and skilled use of her weapon.
Eamon now stood before Lillian, unarmed and at her mercy. She smiled an evil smile, enjoying the power she held over him. She taunted him with his own words that he had spoken just moments before. "Didn't Lord Cyrus gift you a proper weapon before he left?" Eamon raised his hands to block the punch he knew was coming, but Lillian had a surprise in store for him first. Everyone was shocked as they watched Lillian shove her silver knife directly into Eamon's gut. The boy let out a dreadful, slightly girlish scream and took a step back, clutching his side in pain. "She has killed me!" he exclaimed in horror, looking to Clang and Service for help. However, the two men only smiled at him, noticing immediately that there was no blood on Lillian's knife. It was obvious at this point that Lillian especially enjoyed the psychology of battle. Then Lillian's punch landed with a sickening crack, and Eamon's world exploded in pain. He had never felt anything like it before. His nose had also been flattened against his face, and his head spun with the force of the blow. As he fell backwards, he caught a glimpse of Lillian's face, and saw a dark, fierce gleam in her eyes that made him shudder. As he lay there, gasping for breath and clutching his nose, he realized that he was still alive. The pain was excruciating, but he was alive. He looked up at Lillian, half expecting her to finish him off, but she simply walked over to him and picked up his sword. "You are fine, boy," she said, handing him back his weapon. Eamon felt a surge of relief flood through him, mingled with a fierce anger at being made a fool of. He pushed himself up to his feet, wobbling slightly, and glared at Lillian. She then explained to Service and Clang how their armor was specifically designed to withstand regular weapons, but could be cut easily by their black weapons. As she demonstrated the effectiveness of the black weapons, both Service and Clang watched in amazement. The material seemed to stitch itself back together instantly. Both Eamon and Gavrik, still reeling from the pain of Lillian's punch, felt a renewed sense of respect for her skill and strength, despite the humiliation of being bested so easily. Once they had finished examining the new abilities of this miraculous materials and testing it on each other a few times, Clang looked to Lillian and asked, "Where is our fearless leader, Eldrick?" Eldrick lay motionless on the bed, his breath shallow and weak. The company of the Crescent Blades had found him passed out and barely alive. Eldrick awoke with a start, his eyes flickering open to reveal a newfound sense of clarity. He struggled to sit up, his body still weak and trembling. Eldrick's eyes widened as he gazed up at the group, his voice filled with wonder and awe as he spoke of his recent visions. "It's like I've been reborn," he exclaimed, his voice still raspy from his recent bout of unconsciousness. "Cyrus left me a message in the mirror, and he's unlocked something inside me. I don't know what it is yet, but I can feel it coursing through my veins." The group watched intently as Eldrick struggled to sit up, his body still weak and trembling from the ordeal he had just endured. He gasped for breath, his chest heaving with the effort, before continuing on. "He's given me a gift, something that I can't yet comprehend, but I know that I need to stay here, in this cabin, and research and explore these new abilities. I must find the best way to serve him." Eamon and Gavrik shifted uneasily on their feet as Eldric's gaze flickered to their broken noses. They winced in pain, their hands gingerly touching the tender area as they waited for Eldric to make his next move. With sudden determination, Eldric reached out to the cleaning bowl in the corner of the cabin. The surface began to shimmer and vibrate with a strange energy. He placed his hand in the bowl, and the water began to form intricate patterns on the surface, reacting to his touch. Stepping over to Gavrik, Eldric gently placed his hand on his friend's broken nose, causing the group to gasp in amazement. The water seemed to flow through his fingers and into his friend. It reacted to Eldric's touch, flesh and bone contorting and popping back into place in a matter of moments. Gavrik screamed in pain as his nose was healed, but the group was amazed to see that it looked good as new. Eldric's eyes glowed with an otherworldly light as he repeated the process on Eamon, his touch imbued with a newfound power. The broken bones in Eamon's face snapped back into place with a sickening crack, but he gasped in relief as he felt the pain fade away. The group watched in stunned silence as Eldric's abilities were further demonstrated. "How did you receive these powers, Eldric?" Gavrik asked, his voice full of wonder. "It was Lord Cyrus," Eldric replied, his voice filled with awe. "He communicated with me through the giant mirror. I couldn't speak to him, but I could read his messages. It was truly miraculous." Eldric took a deep breath before making the most profound announcement of their journey thus far. "I have discovered that our Lord Cyrus is a god," he declared. "He created all of these items, the weapons, the armor. He gave us the ability to protect the innocent, and he chose us, the 6 of us, to be his torchbearers for the great darkness that is coming." Eldric's words hung in the air as the group absorbed the weight of what he was saying. But he wasn't finished yet. "He has given me the power to heal the sick," Eldric continued, his voice ringing with conviction. "Lord Cyrus has left us, but with a promise to return when his mortal army has rallied. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know this. A great battle approaches, and it will decide the fate of our world. Lord Cyrus has come to save us." The group listened in stunned silence as Eldric's words echoed through the cabin, their hearts filled with both fear and hope. The company of the Crescent Blades gathered around the fire, their faces lit by the flickering flames. They spoke in hushed tones of the mysterious boy from the strange and completely unknown village who had appeared out of nowhere. Clang spoke of an encounter with Jarl, the man that originally found Cyrus walking along the caravan trail. He told tales of how he had seen him create a giant emerald out of a mere stone. Eamon added to the discussion, nodding in agreement, revealing that the boy must have created all the gems he had given them himself. Service interjected, sharing his own encounter with the boy in battle. He spoke of how they were defeated, unable to land a single blow against him. Gavrik's voice filled the silence that followed, describing how he had picked up the lifeless bodies of the dozens that were slain in a single attack by the boy during a caravan raid. Lillian shuddered as she recounted her own experience with Lord Cyrus. She explained how an entire village had wanted to execute her, but he had stood up in her defense and paid the price that she could not pay. She did not believe in gods, but she believed in Cyrus. As the discussion came to an end, the group sat in stunned silence. They knew that they were in the presence of something truly remarkable. Eldric continued to gaze into the mirror. He felt a surge of power wash over him. The image before him shimmered and shifted, and he knew that he was being called to a higher purpose. The voice of Lord Cyrus echoed in his mind, telling him of the great battle that was coming, a war against the forces of chaos that threatened to consume the world. Eldric knew that he had been chosen to lead the charge, to gather an army of faithful followers who would stand with him against the darkness. The mirror explained the true power of Lord Cyrus, of the rewards that awaited those who followed his teachings and the consequences of those who opposed him. His eyes took on a faraway look, and he saw visions of the future. He saw a cave, deep in the heart of the mountains, where the final battle against chaos would take place. He saw the armies of Lord Cyrus gathering, their weapons glinting in the sunlight as they prepared to march into battle. He had to get these words to the people. He needed to tell the masses about their impending doom if they did not follow the glory of his might. He ran out of the cabin to the fire that the group had made. The others listened in awe as Eldrick spoke, their minds racing with thoughts of glory and honor. They knew that they were destined for greatness, that they had been chosen to serve a higher purpose. Eldrick knew that they had to hurry, that time was running out. He urged his companions to spread the word of Lord Cyrus, to gather the faithful and bring them to the cave. He spoke of the power that they possessed, the ability to move hearts and minds, to inspire and lead. And with that, Eldrick declared that he was not just the leader of the company of the Crescent Blades, but the high priest of the army of Lord Cyrus. The others would be the Lord's shadows, his loyal followers, ready to do his bidding and fight for the cause. Together, they would build their defenses and prepare for the coming war, for Lord Cyrus had come to save them, and they would not let him down. That night, 6 individuals prayed to a new god. They thanked him for the gifts that he had supplied them, and swore to uphold his will. They each vowed to follow him and lead others to his grace, and most importantly, that they would be ready when Lord Cyrus called them all to war.